And now to that alarming new headline at Fort Hood, Texas. For the third time in a month, the body of a soldier from the base has been found nearby.
After a massacre, what is believed to be the deadliest mass shooting at a U.S. Army base ever. It happened early this afternoon. At least 12 people have been killed, many more wounded.
Once again, the Army is asking why, after shooting at Fort Hood, Texas, investigators say an Iraq War veteran killed 3 people yesterday, then committed suicide.
16 other people were hurt. It is the second deadly attack by a Fort Hood soldier in the last 5 years.
And the numbers keep climbing. In fact, 14 suicides and 6 more suspected suicides have been reported so far this year among soldiers stationed at Fort Hood.
I still
need a mattress.
Yeah, I still need a mattress.
Yeah, it's been a couple months,
weeks and months. Yeah. Hey everybody, you're listening to Creep It Real. I'm Ashley,
and I'm Bianca.
Thank you for listening to Creep It Real. Yeah, so it's been a week since we talked to you, and we're back for more.
Yay!
So exciting. I have a little bit of like a voice going on today. I don't know what it is.
Are you doing it on purpose?
No.
Oh.
I sound tired.
You do. Are you sick? Are you getting sick?
No. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god.
Not in this day and age. Don't say such a thing.
Don't say sickness.
Don't spread those lies.
Those lies.
I'm fine. No, I think I'm just tired. I'm really tired.
Aww.
All the time.
All the time?
Mm-hmm.
You need to make sleeps.
I do. I was up also late though because, well, sort of. I was playing with that kitten. But I also was asleep a lot of the time. I was like, I wasted my opportunity to play with my. What?
You were at the kitten's house. The kitten's house.
Yes,
nobody else's house.
That's what I like to. That's how I like to talk about people's homes who have animals.
Oh no, same.
It's always the animal's home,
and it is the animal's home. So,
but I was at the kitten's house and I fell asleep.
Oh my god!
It happens every time I'm at the kitten. Well, because the kitten likes to sleep, he'll come lay on me.
And it'll lull you.
And I'll be like, oh, I think I should sleep with him. Because that just seems like the best way to bond with him, right? I'm also, I've been waking up at like 4 a.m. because it gets light around here.
Yeah.
So early. And so I'll think, oh, I gotta see what time it is. And then it's like 4. And I'm like, oh, shit. I've got another hour and a half to
Legit,
go.
I can't sleep past 6:30. I cannot. I can't. Yesterday, I think I started work at 9:30. Mm-hmm. And nope. 6:30, and I'm like,
well, that's nice though, because then you have time to do stuff in the morning.
I did have like a cup of coffee, and I just sat and like,
yeah,
I did so much. I did so much. Actually, no, that's true. I did so much.
That's what. Whenever I was working later in the day, or I think it was at 9, and I would wake up and get research done all the time, but those days are done.
You know what is actually helping me is I'm just coming home and doing research. And I'm actually like putting all my effort at night in doing research instead of like the day before.
Well, that's good. I think we all appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I've just been feeling like, and doing the gratitude journal has really helped me too, to like stay disciplined.
Okay,
yeah.
Disciplined. Mm-hmm.
So it like disciplines me. Okay, at this time, at least before I go to bed, I do the gratitude journal. I know that I'm going to do research prior to that, and I'm not really spending time doing anything else. Maybe posting something on Instagram, but that's it.
Well, not to say that it's good that you don't have any free time, I guess, but I'm glad that the gratitude journal is something that you took away from research, actually.
For sure.
Now, here we are.
Yeah, you should try it. It's a bullet journal, and you're an artistic little baby bee. Yeah. So you might like it.
It's actually. Yeah, it's possible if I spend the time to do it, for sure.
Yeah.
For
well, and then the other thing is, I got all these pens, but I think it would be good for you specifically because you like doing all of those little arts. Yeah. You like doing arts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get going on our expose that we have done today.
Ooh.
So
this is a heavy one, guys. Yeah. Last one was really fun and like silly. Well,
it was kind of spooky. I mean, I think people.
It was spooky, but it was like fun.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't life-threatening type of stuff.
No, it wasn't.
Well, I guess it depends on who you asked.
It depends on how you look at it, but it wasn't.
Not like this.
This is
a lot of heavy stuff.
A lot, for sure.
So When we discussed Lavina Johnson in episode 54, we talked about some staggering statistics like the fact that 1 in 3 women will be raped in the military. And according to the latest figures, there were about 6,000 unrestricted reports of sexual assault in the military in the latest year. But Defense Department officials said that only about 300 cases had been prosecuted, which is some insane amount that I don't want to do the math about.
No,
but it's very small, a very small percentage.
8 women soldiers from Fort Hood, Texas, 6 from the 4th Infantry Division, and 2 from the 1st Armored Cavalry Division have died of, quote, non-combat related injuries on the same base, Camp Taji, and 3 were raped before their deaths. 2 were raped immediately before their deaths, and another was raped prior to arriving in Iraq. 2 military women have died of suspicious non-combat related injuries on Balad base, and 1 was raped before she died. 4 deaths have been classified as suicides, but the common denominator is that they were all stationed out of Fort Hood, Texas.
While the statistics for men aren't quite as high, there are still a staggering amount of physical and sexual assault incidents involving them being the victims as well. As they are deployed, there is an increased level of violence among their own troops. A separate report in January showed that the number of sexual assaults at the nation's service academies had risen by 50% since 2016. The Pentagon's report notes that the military took, quote, disciplinary action of some kind in 65% of cases in 2018, a slight increase from 2017. But almost all of the punishment was handed out by commanders at their discretion outside of the court system, which is absolutely not going to take care of the issue at all, doing it in-house.
No, that's like, what was it that happened a few years ago where somebody was doing an investigation, but it was their own...
Oh, probably Trump.
Yeah, well, it
Okay,
was,
Trump.
but, you know, like...
Yes.
He was doing his own investigation, like, by himself. Like, that's...
Investigating his own.
Yeah, that's not a
own
true investigation.
Right. And if you've been paying attention, there is something going on in the military in general, but especially going on at Fort Hood, not just in the past few months or in the past few years, but for well over a decade.
So there have been 3 deaths associated with the base in the past month, which has lent a lot of media attention to the base and what's going on. And there have, as of July 2020, been 7 Fort Hood soldier deaths, all of whom were junior enlisted members.
7 in just this year alone.
It's 1 a month.
Yeah.
In the past few months, we've learned about the murder of Vanessa Gian, and we've speculated about the motives surrounding her murder. And while we are going to discuss her, in our research, we went down the rabbit hole that we always do, and we found that it goes much deeper than we could have ever realized. For a little background on Fort Hood, it was built in 1942 in Killeen, Texas, which is about halfway between Austin and Waco, and it is one of 10 U.S. Army bases named after former Confederate generals. If you didn't like it in the least amount enough, now you like it less.
Yeah.
Its origin was the need for wide open space to test and train with World War II tank destroyers, and as of 2010, Fort Hood had a total population of 53,416 people, making it the most populous military installation in the world.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of
hell of a lot of people.
Young people, as we'll talk
Yes.
about. The town of Killeen has a population of around 102,000, most of its residents being soldiers and their families or retirees. The Army influences nearly every aspect and area of life in that town. Businesses are busier around deployments and military paydays, so everything is kind of just based off of that. All the restaurants, everything is just kind of, I guess, hinging on those days whenever everybody gets paid.
1st and 15th.
The 1st and the 15th. The violent crime in Killeen has increased by 44% since 1995, and at the Killeen Daily Herald, the employees see similar patterns play out with each troop rotation. First, there's the homecoming day where hundreds of families wave flags and homemade signs welcoming the troops home, and the next, crime reports increased, most specifically cases of domestic violence. A managing attorney of a legal aid office in the area said requests for protective orders had steadily increased over the last several years and questioned whether Fort Hood was doing anywhere near enough for soldiers or victims of domestic violence.
Probably not.
Yeah. He also said a few years prior, the base had refused the group's offer to provide legal assistance and help with protection orders for families on Fort Hood. So it does seem like, I mean, of course it's possible that they were just like, who are you?
Right.
You know, it's also possible that they're just like, stay out of our business, you know, let us handle it ourselves.
Yes.
Which isn't really working that well.
No, because the mental health clinics on Air Force bases I can speak for. I can't speak for Navy or Marine Corps or
Army.
Or Coast Guard. Don't want to neglect the Coast Guard.
No.
But it's terrible.
Right.
We talked about it. Nobody wants to go to the mental health clinic for fear of being booted out of the military.
Right. Yeah. How it's used against you.
Exactly.
At Fort Hood, the age distribution has 33.3% under the age of 18, 32.3% from the ages of 18 to 24, 33% from ages 25 to 42, and only 1.2% from 45 to 64, and then 0.1 where 65 or older. And the median age is 21 years, which is staggeringly low. I'm not saying anything about that necessarily, but I am saying something about it. So there's a lot of young people, most with little life experience. They're likely coming from lower class or underprivileged circumstances. Not all of them, but most of them are using this as a way to gain an education or, you know, make money in some way, do something with their future. They are moving away from home, joining the military, getting into serious relationships. They're having children, going off to war, coming home to families that hardly know them. They have stress and possible trauma in some cases. They're self-medicating. They have addictions. And then domestic violence issues are, of course, bound to arise in these situations. According to the U.S. Army Combat Readiness Center back in 2015, which investigates major accidents and compiles statistics across the Army, the number of reported accidents at Fort Hood reached a 10-year high of 109 in 2015, which is well above reported numbers from earlier years. Accident numbers have risen in Fort Hood even as the population of active duty soldiers has fallen by about 20% since 2011. So it's not only, it's an amalgamation of just absolutely terrible circumstances all around. There's accidents happening because of maybe poor training, lack of funding for training is what they're sometimes claiming, which is like, okay, how much more funding does the military need? Yeah. But maybe just distribution of that funding needs to be allocated differently. 100%. But I don't know if we can claim that it's because of lack of funding. But regardless, it's definitely lack of funds allocated where they need to be allocated, in places such as mental health. That's a great deal, which I'll talk about and we'll talk about. But if that just happened with the whole country, then so many issues would be alleviated. So many. But alas, we consider it to be like witchcraft essentially at this point. Yeah. So now we're going to dive a little bit into the long list of incidents that have taken place at Fort Hood in around the last 12 years. And it is very, very, very possible that there are incidents that we have completely left out because there's just so many things that have happened.
Not only is it possible, it's likely.
It's happened. It's 100% happened. I've tried really hard to be thorough, but there's so many things that have happened here.
In 2008, a staff sergeant, Gilberto Mota, returned from Iraq and murdered his wife, Diana, and then committed suicide. A few months later, in July of 2009, 2 members of the 1st Cavalry Division, who had just returned from the war, decorated for their service, were at a party when one killed the other. They were deployed together, and they killed each other. With what purpose?
I don't know, man. That seemed so crazy to me.
That very same month, Staff Sergeant Sgt Garza, a 28-year-old who had completed 2 deployments, was suffering severely from stress and had just been told 4 days prior that there were no available therapists to help him for a counseling session, killed himself in a friend's apartment located just out of Fort Hood. Ooh.
What happened?
That just is shocking
to me.
4
days. Okay.
It just shocks me that there are no therapists available to assist him with what he needed just when he had just returned from
terrible
war.
Yeah. I mean, they're like
you would think that those are the first people that are like, all right, sorry, you have an appointment. You're going to have to be, I'm so sorry. And we know that you're going through a hard time, but we know that this is of utmost importance.
Right. What I was thinking when I read that was like, was that person sick that day? And they were like, oh, I just am too sick to go in to work. And then, you know, he doesn't have someone to have an appointment with, and then he kills himself. That's awful. That's awful. Justin's mother had this to say: "What bothers me most is this happened while he was supposed to be on suicide watch. To this day, I don't know where he got the gun. A few weeks prior, he had left the Georgia base where he was assigned at the time without permission. The Army tracked him down to a hotel room in Paris, Texas. He had sent his friend a note saying that he wanted to end it all, and he purchased a shotgun. They took him back to Fort Hood and committed him for psychiatric care, initially to a civilian hospital because there was no room at the base hospital," which turns out was actually would have been great if he could have just stayed at the hospital. After 3 days, he was transferred to the base hospital and released after 2 weeks with an order to take outpatient counseling. He had told his uncle that he felt like he was getting really good treatment at the civilian hospital, but once he was transferred back to the base, the doctors there just seemed to be going through the motions.
Crazy.
On July 7th, Sgt Garza received a message canceling what was going to be his first outpatient appointment, and although the Army was supposed to be checking his apartment for guns and alcohol, that Sunday he was able to put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger.
God damn.
His mother later listened to the message on his phone that said, "Sorry, we don't have a counselor for you today. If you don't hear back from us by Monday, give us a call."
Oh, okay.
Which is a lot of help whenever he kills himself. 2 weeks after Sgt Garza's death, Lieutenant General Rick Lynch, who was the base commander at the time, told Congress he was in dire need of more mental health professionals. He told Congress at the time, "That's the biggest frustration. I'm short about 44 of what I am convinced I need at Fort Hood that I just don't have." Among the medical personnel brought to Fort Hood to help handle the alarmingly increasing mental health issues was Major Nadal Malik Hassan.
Oh, God.
So if you don't know, I guess Bianca has let you know that's a little bit foreboding. One afternoon on November 5th, 2009, Hassan, who served as a medical corps psychiatrist, opened fire on fellow military personnel and civilians at Fort Hood, fatally shooting 13 people and injuring over 30 others in what would be the deadliest shooting on an American military base. Hassan had been preparing for deployment in the weeks leading up to the massacre and was also being monitored by a joint terrorism task force due to being in communication with a Yemen-based man who was monitored by the NSA as a security threat. He was paralyzed in the shooting and after his trial would be sentenced to death and is incarcerated at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, awaiting execution. 2 months after the shooting, the DoD released the findings of its investigation of the shooting, which found that the department was unprepared to defend against internal threats. Then Secretary Robert Gates said that previous incidents hadn't drawn enough attention to workplace violence and self-radicalization within the military. And there's also a little bit about that shooting that seems awfully controversial, that he was a Muslim extremist, and the military was very reticent to talk about that fact, I guess, even though he was under surveillance because of this, but they didn't want to talk about it because they said it was controversial. I do think that's an aspect of this shooting, you know, in self-radicalization or not, that is radicalization, period. I mean, so.
Okay. So what am I trying to say? He probably should have had a better watch on him, really. I mean,
they didn't know what to do with it. They heard him say in a conversation certain things that should have been red flags, but they said that they didn't want to infringe on his First Amendment rights. And it was just I just don't know. I think at the time it was just really hard for them to figure out what to do with it. They clearly were unequipped or ill-equipped to handle what was going on. I mean, clearly, but that seems to be a kind of a trend, you know, like the men that were training to fly planes into buildings for 9/11 were doing it with our military.
And,
so, you know, I'm just like, oh, just go about your business because we don't want to offend you.
We don't want to offend you. Goodbye.
And I'm not trying to be anti-Muslim or anything. It's just that in this case, that's what was going on, but the military didn't really want to talk about it.
Well, it's not about being anti-Muslim. It's about being aware of somebody that's making comments that are not anti-American,
and they're threatening,
exactly.
They were threatening comments.
That are threatening. That's all I really have to say on that situation.
Yeah, and you know, if someone in the military is threat to his fellow servicemen, that should be a concern to everybody in the military and otherwise, because we're supposed to be, they're serving their country and they should at least have some respect and safety to do so.
And the thing is, when you take the oath to be a member of the military, you take an oath to protect this nation against, and it's so telling of like the times. You take an oath to protect the country against terrorists, both foreign and domestic. And you just, I guess maybe as somebody who was in the military, like I think of what would I have thought in that situation. Maybe I would have thought, this person took the same oath I did.
Yeah.
They're not,
but I mean,
that's fine. Like they don't mean that. That's not what they mean. Maybe he meant it in a different way, but
yeah.
If he is having conversations and making threatening comments against the organization that he works for, perhaps let's take a closer look at him and maybe not deploy him in a couple weeks.
For sure.
Sorry.
Well,
that's my soapbox.
He got out of getting deployed, that's for sure.
Well, great.
Okay. So at the time in 2009, there had been 10 suicides by personnel assigned to Fort Hood, and there were over 76 since 2003, which is quite a lot in a 6-year period. Colonel Edward McCabe, a chaplain at Fort Hood, said that the number of divorces and physical abuse he'd seen, or that he'd, quote, had to deal with, are huge. Every night at my apartment complex, some soldier and his wife are screaming and shouting at each other. So it seems like that is a little bit of a volatile situation there. Then we're going to move on to April 2nd, 2014, when 34-year-old Army specialist and Iraq War veteran Ivan Lopez attempted to obtain a 10-day leave form so he could attend to family matters, but was informed that he would have to come back later to get it, which started an argument between him and several other shoulders. Him and some shoulders. Several other
You did it again.
Soldiers. He would later be denied his request. He went outside to smoke and then came back and opened fire inside the same building, the 49th Transportation Battalion Administrative Office. After shooting a few people, he would travel to a parking garage, shooting others along the way, eventually coming to a confrontation with an MPO who fired a shot at him after he drew a weapon. Lopez would respond by committing suicide, and in the end he had killed 3 people and injured 14 more. So he was allegedly stressed over financial issues along with the deaths of both his mother and grandfather within months of each other. And about 5 months prior to the shooting, he was receiving regular psychiatric treatment for depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. He wanted to take the leave to attend his mother's funeral in Puerto Rico. So it took about 5 days for it to get approved. And then he was only granted 24 hours leave, which really would have been impossible to have gone to Puerto Rico for his mother's funeral. So that allegedly infuriated him, which I can understand in that case. He also requested a transfer in the months leading up to the shooting and claimed that he was being taunted and picked on by other soldiers in the unit. Additionally, Lopez would describe in detail his experiences in direct combat while in Iraq and claimed that he was a sniper who had been to the Central African Republic, though according to military officials, he had never experienced any direct combat. So obviously, Lopez was a bit emotionally disturbed. He needed some mental health help. That wasn't coming to him. And then what happened? Well, he took it out on fellow servicemen. Yes.
Innocent people
that he just was driving up on in his car and shooting. So then our next incident took place in March of 2015. It involved Sergeant First Class Gregory McQueen, who was a sexual assault prevention officer on the base Fort Hood. He was dishonorably discharged after having been convicted of organizing a prostitution ring, which would be run through swinger and stripper parties. The prostitution ring itself never actually came to fruition before investigators caught on to the developing scheme, but the news broke amid a series of pretty high-profile sexual assault and abuse allegations that were coming out in the military, including one out of the Pentagon where Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Krasinski, the head of the Air Force's Assault Prevention and Response Office, was accused of groping a woman in a parking lot and later acquitted in another misdemeanor assault case in 2013. So that was in the aftermath of yet another scandal where at a joint base in San Antonio, Lackland, where over 35 basic training instructors have been investigated with misconduct with 68 recruits and technical school students in the past 9 years total. So I guess it's just a running...
Which is what I was talking about when I was telling you about Sergeant Walker who committed suicide. That was the scandal that I was telling you about.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I know. I was doing research into this whole situation. And then, you know how you do research and then all of a sudden you get links that join to links. And then you're like, and then they talk about in past with the 2000, I think it was like 2009 to 2000 and I don't know, 13 or 15 Lackland Air Force Base scandal. That's the one that I was...
Yeah, on our Livina Johnson episode.
On the Livina Johnson episode. That's the scandal that I was actually directly, like, I don't want to say involved in, but OSI did contact me to, like, give a statement about that. And that's the one.
Yeah.
And... Fuck, I was reading all of the different testimonies by all of the different MTIs, and I was like, geez, I know him. I wasn't a part of his squadron, but I know of his name.
Yeah.
It's yuck.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Not great.
It's not great. So McQueen was dishonorably discharged after having been convicted of organizing a prostitution ring and had recruited 3 lower-ranking female soldiers into the ring, offering them easy money. If you don't know, pay in the military isn't great. Yeah, you get free housing, you get pretty free food, inexpensive living expenses, but it's not great money.
Yeah.
And in doing the research that we could about Fort Hood, I came across an article from the Daily Beast in 2017 stating that McQueen photographed this soldier, they call her Jane in the article, probably not to embarrass her, naked, and exhibited her assets to higher-ups at Fort Hood.
Gross.
There was a barrage of sexploits pinned to McQueen, and he was pimping subordinate soldiers and offering them up as a la carte flesh for higher-ranking officers who attended his sex parties.
Oh, you mean higher-ranking officers in the military have sex parties where they're trafficking people around? What?
These women would be paraded at McQueen's The Swinger parties as part of an agreement that there would be booze and women for their enjoyment. Their meaning the higher-ranking officers.
Which is a position of power, in case you haven't realized, that makes the situation a little bit of an imbalanced one.
Absolutely, yeah. Because you have your enlisted and then you have your above your top enlisted, you have your officers. Although he copped to 15 of 21 charges brought against him, which included pandering or recruiting sex workers, he was not convicted of sexual assault somehow. Although the judge agreed that McQueen, quote, aggressively kissed a female soldier against her will. I mean, I guess this didn't cross into full-blown sexual assault.
No, the rule is you got to touch a tit in order for it to be...
That's exactly what I was thinking.
What? Oh.
Which, by the way, could have gotten him 40 years because he didn't penetrate her when he touched her inappropriately without her permission. Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
After his arrest, McQueen denied he knew anything about a prostitution ring and even volunteered to take a polygraph, which we all know is super accurate.
Yeah, if you're a sociopath, you can convince yourself you're telling the truth, or at least just be calm enough when you're lying to just get away with it.
Yeah. Prosecutors convinced the soldier who was being pimped out by McQueen to wear a wire in an attempt to get Soldier Grimes to talk about their paid sex, but he never talked about it, which is unfortunate because I think that it could have really gotten him that 40 years that he deserves.
I wonder why he didn't want to talk about it.
He probably knew. He was probably like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it. Like, I don't know. There's something about that that's like...
Snitches get stitches.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. But Grimes was a part of a sex ring. Or not a sex ring, I think a prostitution ring, which there's nothing wrong with prostitution if you are choosing to do...
Yes.
If you're choosing to choose sex work as your career...
Yes.
Go for it.
Right.
But if you're being
persuaded
exploited and persuaded by somebody who you believe is in a position of power over you, and that's not really what you are choosing to do, obviously you're not choosing to do that if you are in the military. You're trying to choose a completely different career path.
Yeah.
But it's just sad how how people in positions of power can really convince somebody, hey, this is the easy way out. Let's just do it. You'll make easy money.
It happens all the time, unfortunately. So moving on June 2nd, 2016, a light medium tactical vehicle got stuck in a flooded low water crossing and was swept away. It overturned and it killed 9 soldiers that were inside of it. I think 3 of them got away. It was just one in another line of just unfortunate incidents that have occurred at Fort Hood. And then a few months later, on November 3rd, in 2016, the remains of a Fort Hood soldier who had been missing nearly a month, 19-year-old Dakota Lee Stump, were found next to a flipped-over vehicle. The vehicle was registered to him. It was in a wooded area about 100 yards from the roadway near a building, number 43028, on Fort Hood. According to witness statements and cell phone records, the night he disappeared, October 10th, he had driven to an on-base shop around 6:30 p.m., where he withdrew money for one of the over 21 soldiers to buy him a bottle of Pinnacle vodka.
Yuck.
They went back to the barracks. You're a vodka snob, okay?
I'm not. I drink Tito's. Tito's is like a super...
Well, it's affordable, but it's still... It's a hell of a well-made vodka.
Are you saying that because it's from Austin?
Yeah. So they went back to the barracks to drink until Dakota had to be back at his troop's motor pool at 9:30. So it was about 3 hours of drinking that he got to do before he was going back to work. At 9 p.m., he sent his girlfriend a text that said, "I'm drunk as fuck." He was already 3 minutes late when his friends heard his tires squealing out of the barracks parking lot, and witnesses later saw him run a red light, according to the investigation. After he didn't show up to his unit or respond to phone calls the next day, his unit reported him missing to Fort Hood's military police.
So for a little under a month, his remains were there. There's really that little awareness about what's going on the base. Completely doubtful. When you come back on base, you have to be allowed onto it by showing your, what's called your CAC. I know. I know. That's why I put it. It stands for Common Access Card. A lot of people say CAC card, but that's redundant. Yeah. And you know how I am about saying redundant things. None of the MPs who let him on base could verify his Mustang. Even when I was in 2011, they had to scan your card. And in my belief, there has to be some sort of database that, you know, says, okay, this person came on base, but I don't know because I wasn't in security forces.
Yeah.
But really, like, there's that little awareness that he's back on base.
Well, it seems like there's either a serious lack of oversight at this base somehow, or there's a lot of covering up of some shady shit that goes on all the time.
It could be that he was just, here's the other truth, is that it could be that he really was drunk and they really couldn't find it and they really didn't know where to look. Because, it's entirely possible.
Well, let's continue on with his story before we start talking about it.
Okay. His mother, Patrice Wise, told the Army Times after he was found that the whole time he was laying in the woods and nobody would look, he knew going into this that he could be giving his life for all of us and they couldn't even go look for him. We were told that we were taking time away from their training.
So unit leadership claims that they contacted local police and hospitals and remained in close contact with Dakota's mother, brother, and girlfriend and monitored his room while he was missing. They alleged that they were calling his cell phone where they said the line rang, but there was no answer. Military police ran a check to see the last place his phone had pinged, which they uncovered was in Indianapolis, and his family was from Indiana. And so the whole AWOL, like he went AWOL theory really took off. And it turns out that the soldier who had copied the number did it wrong, and it wasn't even his phone number that had pinged in Indianapolis.
Excellent.
So it was really that reason alone that they thought he had run. And what's really a shame, let me continue. That said, because he had been declared a deserter, they didn't conduct any searches for him, which is obviously quite unfortunate, being that his remains were discovered by soldiers conducting land navigation training pretty much right off of where the base was located. It was not that far away. It was like less than a quarter of a mile from the base. And based on the extensive damage to his car and the surrounding foliage in the trees, the early indications were that his car had veered off the road and had flipped over multiple times, but it wasn't visible from the road due to the terrain and the vegetation.
So, real quick, they had found him on the base.
Okay.
They found him near building 430287.
Yeah, so I had thought that he had it was like outside the fences of Fort Hood.
No.
Okay.
Because like on a military installation, there's like its own. It's kind of like its own city.
Okay.
Where you do have your own like road names, but there are their own buildings as well.
Okay.
So
he drove off the road on base.
right.
He was okay. So it was later revealed via a FOIA request that the official story is that Dakota died when he missed a turn while speeding on post, sending his car hundreds of feet into a tree line, which killed him upon impact. The car flipped and impacted again.
The Army was able to recreate the accident based on the diagnostics of the vehicle. However, his body was so decomposed by the time that they found him that traces of alcohol would, of course, have been difficult to find.
Right. While this death does strongly appear to be a terrible accident, what is a shame here is how the Army treated the issue of Dakota's disappearance, quickly brushing it off as an AWOL situation and not really doing anything serious to look for him, as he was eventually found on the fucking base. As I'm here, I'm not even, when I was so outraged when I was writing these notes, I wasn't even realizing that he was actually on the base. I thought he was at least
off of it,
just a little bit, but no.
So the bone that they never found was his hyoid, which true crime nerds know that your hyoid gets broken when you're strangled. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it could have been destroyed on impact if he crashed that violently, but I've never heard anything like that. I've never heard anything against it either.
Yeah.
The other thing was that his t-shirt had slash marks in it and a hole. I don't know, maybe I know he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, as far as the diagnostics of the vehicle are concerned. I don't know if that's anything nefarious. And then I also had heard that a state trooper was going to actually help the family, but after being given his name, the trooper wouldn't call Dakota's family back, and it just all seems kind of fishy to me.
It does seem fishy, and it's hard to not be suspicious because there's always some sort of cover-up seemingly happening. Mm-hmm. It's like you make it yourself suspicious because of the lack of information you're providing, or the misinformation, or the lack of care.
Right.
It could be just a huge amount of incompetence, but I'm not sure what exactly happened. I do think it's likely he was drunk driving and got in an accident, but why was he not found for so long is really the biggest problem.
Right.
But maybe something nefarious did happen. It's possible.
I mean, and there are so many cases of accidents in which young troops do get into drunk driving accidents. I mean, when I was at Shepherd, there was a girl who had just come back from deployment, and she was driving drunk home, and she killed the general of the base.
Oof.
And there are just so many reports of it, and it just
there's a lot of stress,
so
a lot
much.
of alcohol.
Absolutely.
Remember you were talking about people drinking hand sanitizer.
People drank hand sanitizer when I was in basic to try to get a little bit drunk. Mm-hmm. It was not a cute situation.
Yeah.
In 2017, there were 13 Fort Hood soldiers, ranging from private to major, that were arrested in another prostitution sting.
On March 1st of this year, 20-year-old specialist Shelby Jones was found by law enforcement with a gunshot wound outside of a convenience store. Police believe he was shot at a nearby strip club and dumped at the convenience store. He had joined the Army in May of 2017 as a cavalry scout, according to a news release from the fort. He joined Fort Hood's 3rd Cavalry Regiment in August of 2018 and deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Inherent Resolve from May 2018 to January 2019. His murder is still under investigation. So that's just that's one of the 7 this year, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. On March 5th, 4 days later, in case it's difficult to keep up with all of these incidents, 29-year-old Christopher Wayne Sawyer was found unresponsive in his on-post residence. The Army's Criminal Investigation Command has not ruled out foul play. In addition to Christopher, 25-year-old Raul Torres was recorded as a second death at Fort Hood that day, but the cause of his death is unknown, which really means a lot of nothing at this point. 9 days later, both 23-year-old Freddie Benigno de la Cruz and 23-year-old Army vet Shaquan Markel Allred were murdered in a triple killing at an apartment complex in a case that is still under investigation, and both of those men are obviously from Fort Hood. On May 18th of this year, just a few days short of his 28th birthday, Private First Class Brandon Rosencrans was found shot to death in Harker Heights along the side of Fuller Lane, just north of the western end of Stillhouse Hollow Lake. His Jeep was found engulfed in flames 3 miles away a short while later. This case is also still under investigation. Rosencrans joined the Army in 2018 and was eventually sent to Fort Hood. His father, Thomas Berg Sr., says that the Harker Heights Police and Fort Hood have both been assets to him in his investigation into his son's death.
Wow.
Right. Berg believes it's people outside of the base who prey on the service members that pose a real threat and who did this to his son. A woman named Kim Waddell, the mother of Private Gregory Morales, whose remains were discovered last month during the search for a missing woman we will talk about shortly, and we mentioned earlier, agrees with that sentiment. Private Second Class Gregory Waddell Morales had been confirmed as missing and classified as AWOL when he did not return to the base August 20th, which was a mere 5 fucking days before he was supposed to be discharged, ending his enlistment that started back in 2015. The Army would still later upgrade his classification to desertion on September 19th.
The other thing is he was scheduled to get divorced, and his family suffered tragedy since the day he disappeared. He had been last seen driving a black Kia Rio, which he purchased a week before his disappearance.
It was reported that he was last seen on the night of August 19th when he went to a club and later met up with some friends, according to his mother. She doesn't know the names of these friends and is unsure if the police know of them or have interviewed them, as they have kept all the information in this case closely guarded and not really shared much with her.
Of course.
The last known contact with him was the day after this. His sister-in-law later searched through Carfax and found his car, while also learning that the car was in Dallas in December, to where it was inspected and transferred back to the Fort Hood area in January. And the CID confirmed that they had possession of the vehicle, which is a little strange considering that they've pretty much told this family, hey, he just deserted.
No, AWOL.
Because Morales was considered a deserter, again, no searches were ever conducted for him as far as I could tell. And his mother, Kim, was just left being told that he went AWOL, and that was that. But if that was the case, why did the Army CID have possession of his vehicle and not report it to the family at all? The family says that this was the first time that they even came close to admitting that they might have made a mistake and that foul play was possibly involved because he wasn't with his vehicle. It's ridiculous.
In April of this year, his family posted on Facebook, quote, "It's been 7 months and we have literally heard absolutely nothing. They haven't found his car," which they had his car in their possession. Mm-hmm. No sightings of him. Phone hasn't been used at all. No cash has been pulled. No debit purchase. How did he just disappear into thin air? It's not right by any means. It's not possible. Someone knows something out there. It hurts me that my husband, 2 daughters, and I are all sitting at the dinner table eating, and my husband gets quiet. I ask what's wrong, and he says I'm sad because our girls will never know their uncle. Hearing him say that hurts. The fact that's true hurts. They never got to meet him because he was always gone serving our country. Please help us locate my brother-in-law, Gregory Waddell Morales. He has been missing since 8/19/19 from Fort Hood, Texas. No one has heard from or seen him since that night. He was scheduled to process out of the military last September, just a few days before he went missing. So AWOL just doesn't make sense. If you have seen him or heard from him, please let me know or call the MPs at Fort Hood. The police won't look for him. They suggested posting on Facebook, so here I am again. Please share until he is found. He had just bought a black 2018 Kia Rio, paper tag. Be anonymous if you need to be, but please help find my brother-in-law to give my husband and mother-in-law closure. He is now 24, about 5'11", brown hair and brown eyes.
So sad. So that is, they, continued on in this. He's just AWOL, everybody. Take it easy. Until his skeletal remains were located in June of this year during the search for yet another missing Fort Hood soldier. They were found in a field several miles from Fort Hood. His clothing was shredded and scattered, and he was lightly covered in dirt. AWOL? I don't think so.
The Fort Hood CID had actually contacted Killeen police in reference to a tip it received saying, So for those of y'all posting about the body found, this is what I know. 1, it's a body that's been dead since around August or September of last year. 2, it was buried. They had shovels and were digging. And 3, it's definitely a soldier because CID is involved. I know this information because I live in the neighborhood and they were investigating within about 20 feet of my backyard. I have cameras that face my backyard and I offered to review video for the investigators. I hope they find out who it is and who caused the death. God rest their soul and may he guide investigators to the path of the perpetrators.
Whew. Kim Waddell, his mother, says she fought with the Army since day one about the fact that her son was not a deserter and that he was not simply a grown man who left on his own, and she insisted the whole time that foul play was involved. At the time of his disappearance, Gregory was experiencing some personal issues, like you said, and had told his mother that he was saving up to hire a divorce attorney, which I would assume means it wasn't going to be an amicable situation. But according to his mother, she is on good terms with his wife, and I suppose she's not a person of interest in his death, as I haven't read anything about that whatsoever.
But in kind of a weird twist, his ex or estranged wife was arrested for trespassing on somebody else's property.
Oh.
And then the other thing is his mom, Kim Waddell, her house mysteriously burned down after.
What?
Yeah, it's...
Okay.
It's
Interesting.
weird. It's interesting.
There's something else. Oh, I gotta just say it, even though it's not really fitting for here at this point, but I'm just gonna say it is sometimes I feel like after we researched the hoodoo stuff and we talked about how sometimes the bad stuff comes at you and you have to redirect it. And if you don't redirect it, it just keeps happening to you over and over and over. And I started thinking about it, and I've known someone that had that happen to them before. And then there's somebody at work even who just constantly, it's like, how does this keep happening? That every single thing that like goes wrong happens to her, and it's just crazy, and like in personal and otherwise, and I'm like, there's something on you, like you need to redirect it.
She needs to redirect it.
Yeah, so that's something that I took away from the hoodoo was
wow.
like, that is, if you start noticing that stuff is going wrong and it just keeps saying like
a pattern,
damn it, I just keep hitting bad luck.
Yeah.
You gotta do some intentional redirection. Even if you can't figure out the source, you gotta like just push it back.
Right.
Anyway, so that's a little bit of a side note. I wasn't trying to victim blame in any way whatsoever. It was like, oh man, sometimes people just seem to have it, like maybe like his death ended up opening some sort of door of badness that just kept coming. Or maybe her house got burnt down because there was some sort of evidence in it. Who knows?
Yeah.
So although the Army Criminal Investigation Command and local authorities now suspect foul play in his death, as they were kind of forced to admit, considering his remains were found,
right.
It's pretty much the only reason why they did it, I would say. The family has been told that he will remain on the deserter list until the results of his autopsy are released and can prove that he has been dead since he went missing. As his mom says, it would be pretty strange to assume he just disappeared for a few months and then ended up being killed right outside the base. She feels she knew what happened was something nefarious and was telling them that foul play was involved and was ignored. And Gregory has since been reinstated, so that's good. Okay, so that did happen. I was a little worried. And I knew it when I typed it, and posthumously promoted to private second class.
Of course, the disappearance of 20-year-old Vanessa Gian in April has brought nationwide attention to the base recently when specialist Erin Robinson, who was also 20, killed her in an armory room while she was on duty.
On June 30th, contractors who were working on a fence along the Leon River discovered what would later be identified as the dismembered remains of Vanessa, which were found buried along the river. Vanessa was last seen on April 22nd, around 1 p.m. in the parking lot of her unit, the Regimental Engineer Squadron Headquarters of the 3rd Cavalry Division. Man, those military tongue twisters.
They love long title. I was a bioenvironmental engineering technician, or hazmat.
Oh.
As the civilian sector would like to call.
Yeah. Her car and barracks keys, ID card, and bank card were all found inside the armory where she worked, and her family felt the circumstances in which she had disappeared were more than suspicious, which I would agree.
So, Specialist Erin Robinson had attacked her with a hammer, causing her blood to be splashed all over the armory room, and after she was dead, Robinson allegedly contacted his civilian girlfriend, who just also happened to be slightly married, Cassie Aguilar, to help him bury her bloody body. When setting her body on fire proved not to work because they have no idea how cremation actually works, they dismembered her body with a fucking machete, which we will detail in just a few moments here. Robinson then fled the post, of course, becoming the number one suspect in her murder. Army CID Special Agent Damon Phelps declined to discuss just how Robinson was able to get away from a heavily guarded military installation, stating, quote, "He was not in CID custody at the time, so I can't answer further. I can't detail anything about the ongoing investigation." Police then tracked him, and as they attempted to make contact, he took out a weapon and committed suicide.
So, the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command, CID, and the FBI with Bell County Sheriff's Office, Killeen Police, Belton Police, Texas Parks and Wildlife,
Oh gosh,
the
that's
U.S.
a lot.
Marshal Service, and the Texas Rangers all worked together somehow on finding Vanessa. Multiple units at Fort Hood conducted searches for her, including her own 3CR, which I might say is her own unit searching for her is maybe a wee bit, what's the word? Conflict of interest, perhaps. Just before Gian disappeared, as I'm sure many of you won't be surprised to hear, she told her family that she had been sexually harassed by a sergeant at Fort Hood, who other female soldiers had already made complaints about, all of which had gotten dismissed. Allegedly, the man, Aaron David Robinson, had watched Vanessa while she showered at the base. When her mother told her to report him, Vanessa told her that she could, quote, put a stop to it herself. So it's no surprise that early on in Vanessa's disappearance, her mother told reporters that she didn't trust the Army's handling of the investigation, and her attorney, Natalie Kawam, gave the statement that she believed the family was, quote, being kept in the dark because so few details had been released to them regarding her disappearance. Which, to be fair, is a running theme with the military when something has run afoul within the ranks. Vanessa's family have insisted for weeks that she told multiple people she was being sexually harassed shortly before she disappeared. The family's attorney, Kawam, said that Vanessa planned to file a sexual harassment complaint against Robinson the day after she was killed. Fort Hood said in a statement that they are not aware of any pending sexual harassment cases against Robinson at this time. Well, of course they wouldn't.
Of course not, because there's nothing to... She was killed. She couldn't do it.
But that really doesn't mean much when you consider the fact that Vanessa told her mother that the man had already had multiple complaints against him dismissed, like we just said.
Right.
And what we know regarding rape and the report of assault in the military among troops. The CID has maintained that after they conducted over 300 interviews, that they have, quote, no credible information regarding the allegations that Robinson was harassing Gian. But then in mid-June, Kawam said she had uncovered 2 alleged incidents of sexual harassment towards Gian at the base. In one of these cases, a superior allegedly walked in on Vanessa when she was showering, which is when Robinson did that. And in the other, a colleague made a vulgar remark to her in Spanish.
Of course, Special Agent Phelps of the CID said the Army has found no evidence of those allegations.
Of course.
The Army, however, has opened an investigation into the Sexual Harassment, Assault Response and Prevention, or SHARP, program at Fort Hood.
Yeah, probably.
Too little, too late. Little bit.
Right. So on June 13th, after hundreds of protesters gathered at the gates of Fort Hood to protest the lack of information in the case, the CID reported that while they found no evidence of assault, they did believe that foul play was involved in her disappearance. Thank you. On June 23rd, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia met with Fort Hood officials who told her that more than 300 interviews and 10,000 hours were spent investigating Vanessa's disappearance. On June 30th, the U.S. Army CID said in a statement that agents who had returned to an area of interest discovered partial human remains near the base, and Army investigators were called to the scene. The area had been searched 10 days prior by Texas Rangers, detectives, and cadaver dogs after a burn mound was found nearby. The investigators theorized that the remains, which had previously been buried under concrete, had been uncovered by wildlife. Tim Miller of Texas EquiSearch said it was the most sophisticated burial site he'd ever seen, which is really saying something because I've heard Tim Miller of EquiSearch in a number of high-profile cases.
Casey Anthony.
Yeah. On Sunday, July 5th, lawyers for Vanessa Gian's family confirmed that the human remains that had been discovered were identified as Vanessa's, who had finally been found well over 2 months after she had disappeared, not far from the base. Not on the base, though, this time.
Not on the base, but not far from it.
According to a federal affidavit in Vanessa's case, she left the arms room where she was working to go to a separate room located in the building next door so that she could confirm serial numbers for weapons and equipment that she was working on. The soldier who was in charge of that second room was Specialist Aaron David Robinson, who authorities allege bludgeoned her to death with a hammer, like Bianca said, which is absolutely horrible.
Ugh.
He then placed her body inside a heavy-duty Pelican case with wheels and placed her body in his vehicle. I'll get to it in a minute, but he was seen struggling to get the heavy case into his car by someone that night, the affidavit says. Then he drove to the spot along the Leon River where his girlfriend, who was the estranged wife of yet another soldier, helped him dispose of Vanessa's remains. And I am like, what in the world? How did this man bludgeon a woman to death with a hammer inside of a building on base and somehow got away with it for 2 months?
No.
Okay.
No. Just no. Because no. Just no.
And leave, according to the military, according to Fort Hood, leave no signs of assault.
No.
I highly fucking doubt that.
No.
The girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, that 22-year-old woman from Killeen, they used a machete and or an axe or hatchet to cut Vanessa's body into pieces. They removed her limbs and her head. Then they attempted to burn the body, like you said. Obviously, they're stupid, so it didn't burn completely.
Of course.
Idiots.
You can't.
You can.
You can,
but you have to have certain conditions
God, are you
and
kidding me?
things.
Of
And
course.
these guys, like, doing this in the middle of, on the side of a river, just weren't thinking.
No.
Oh, so they placed her remains in 3 separate holes and covered them up. Then a few days later, they returned to the site to attempt to break the body down more. They tried to burn the pieces and encase them in concrete, that's where it takes it up a notch. They then reburied the remains and went home to burn their clothes. Kawam asked the question, how does someone disappear on a base that has more protection and safeguards than anyone else on the planet? And I take that even further and say that, again, how does someone bludgeon someone to death with a hammer, remove her body and all the evidence, and keep it covered up for months on a base that should have people walking around, cameras, I think, tons of cameras. I mean, people on schedules, having to be accountable for most of their everyday actions, I would think. It just seems so hard to believe.
People every day after work, I think it's around 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock. I don't remember. I haven't been in the military for about 10 years. You have to, they play the national anthem. And if you are walking during the national anthem, you will get called out so quick that you were walking during the national anthem and you didn't stop and stand at attention.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me to believe that nobody fucking found this guy or was like, hey, what do you do? Like, it's just extremely difficult for me to believe.
Yeah, bludgeoned to death with a hammer is going to leave a lot of blood spatter. And sorry to say, not that I'm an expert in this, but it's going to do it.
Right.
And then you have to move her entire body? Are you kidding me?
I don't know. It's a lot. And it's not like there's nobody around on a base. And especially on a base of this
people.
This base is
so
huge.
many people.
So many people on this base. There's
It's very interesting. Her older sister, Myra, expressed her frustration in a press conference saying, this happened in a federal building and we're still not getting answers, which I gotta say personally is a mite suspicious. Like I said, where were the cameras? Were there no cameras outside? None inside? Were there no other personnel around at the time? I find that hard to believe. She says that their family hasn't seen a flight log or anything that proves that the Army actually did conduct these 500 soldier a day searches that they claim that they had done for her sister. And so according to CID Senior Specialist Agent Damon Phelps, Robinson and Gian were colleagues but worked in separate buildings and operated under different chains of command. And I don't know really what difference that makes, but there it is.
Well, if they worked in different buildings, I guess, and they had different chains of command, maybe
That's a
those
reason.
chains weren't speaking.
Communicating.
Yeah. and they were looking, and for instance, for her chain of command, they're probably doing all of the work if they really are doing the work that they claim to be doing, they're asking the questions and doing their own thing. But that doesn't really necessarily mean that these two lines are communicating, which
somebody should have been like, wait a second, why is there blood smeared everywhere?
Right.
Right?
That's the main concern.
Yeah.
But,
I need to hear an answer about why no one noticed
the blood.
The blood's everywhere.
Unless he was excellent at covering that up, but nobody's really that
What
excellent.
did he do? He laid down a tarp and that no one noticed?
Exactly.
Give me a break.
Bludgeoning her to death with a hammer.
Inside of a tent?
Exactly,
no. He's like, let's go in this tent and let me do his hair. I don't think so. I don't think so.
No.
So over 90 lawmakers earlier this month called for an independent review of how the Army handled the disappearance of Vanessa from the base. And Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy has ordered an, quote, independent and comprehensive review of Fort Hood command climate, which, I mean, that's great, but I mean, how many times has probably that been done with no side effect whatsoever? On July 17th, which was only 8 days ago, 26-year-old Private Myra Morta was found, quote, unresponsive in the area of Stillhouse Lake. Yet again, we are talking about another body found near that same lake that someone else was earlier, in a situation that is currently being investigated by the Bell County Sheriff's Department. They have released that they believe he drowned in the lake as his body was found by fishermen in a boat at the base of the dam just after midnight, which is little strange. The preliminary autopsy, which honestly doesn't really mean much, because they really are just kind of giving a glance over and then saying, okay, indicated that his death was consistent with a drowning. The full autopsy will be conducted by the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office. Jermaine Hamlin, who went through basic training with Morta at Fort Benning in Georgia, said, quote, we used to talk about a lot of stuff, and he told me he didn't know how to swim. He doesn't know if Myra liked to fish, but he says that he wouldn't be surprised if he went to the lake to meditate and read. He says, he meant a lot to me. It's kind of hard to talk about it. He always kept a smile on my face. So I'm not trying to be speculatory here, but it made me wonder if perhaps they might have had some kind of relationship, and perhaps that could be some kind of motive in a crime against him. Of course, we don't know that, and I'm not trying to spread conjecture-y rumors about him, but men can have friends and think fondly of them without it being romantic.
True. Exactly.
But I was just like, it's very sad, first of all, that this person lost somebody who meant so much to him, but also I just thought, it was included in this article, and then I was like, maybe it was included for a reason, and maybe that has something to do with what's going on here. We don't really know, but I don't think that anyone's so far looked into it too hard.
Deeply. I mean, it just happened.
Right.
It just happened.
Yeah. It definitely has.
It just happened, I don't know, literally a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know. We just don't know. But it just happened again.
Mm-hmm. Right. Another friend of his from basic training in Fort Benning expressed concern about the safety at Fort Hood, saying, in my duty station, I feel safe. But for those in Fort Hood, Texas, I am sorry for them. Oof. I don't know what's going on there. Which is a theme. Morta had joined the Army back in September of last year as a Bradley fighting vehicle mechanic, and that obviously it was an unfortunate turn of events that he got sent to Fort Hood, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have any power over where you get sent, to be honest with you.
That's unfortunate. So, military officials say that the crime and violence associated with Fort Hood has to be thought about with the size of the base in mind. There are about 60,000 soldiers. I can't remember. What did you say at the beginning of this episode? It was something like 50 to 60,000 assigned to Fort Hood, which is a lot to be sure. But I think there are other factors at play here that make me think it's not just a numbers game at all. It can't just be considered to be. There's a lot of people here, so that's why this is happening so much.
Yeah.
Fort Hood has some of the most comprehensive base resources of any in the United States and is known for the Army units who trained there among some of the best training areas in the military. Still, it is often thought to be a less than desirable duty station Army-wide.
Real quick, I just want to say, while we did focus on Fort Hood and Fort Hood disappearances and murders or deaths in this episode, don't think at all this type of behavior and these types of situations happen in an isolated location within an isolated branch of the military. Men and women from each and every single branch and in each and every single career field at each and every single base are treated in the same regard. They and we are just numbers and property of the military, and women specifically don't say anything for fear that they will receive backlash from their superiors, the very people who are subjecting them to the abuses they suffer. We know, that we are joining an organization that is male-dominated, and unfortunately, these situations are just viewed by women in particular as a, quote, part of the territory that you join.
It's pretty awful.
It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you watched it, AOC's speech.
Mm-mm.
Well, she was saying, you know, somebody had called her a fucking bitch in Congress, and she just was going to let it go. And she was like, it's just another day. But it wasn't until this particular congressman hid behind his wife and daughters and said, well, I have a wife and I have daughters. I'm not sexist.
All right. I have black friends.
Exactly. And she said, it's not okay to just view this as an everyday thing anymore. It's not okay to just view this as part of the territory any longer.
Yeah.
And for some reason that really, really stuck with me. Especially in doing research on this is I was always like, well, yeah, whatever. It's just part of the territory. I'm a woman joining a man's world. It's going to come. But why is that okay? It's not fucking okay.
No, not at all. No. And it's she's true or she's right. Like, you do have to say something. You have to be the one to stop the cycle.
Yes.
It's the same thing with racism. You know, you let those old folks keep spouting off racist shit because they're old, and you're just letting that perpetuate, you know, that it's okay. And maybe if we had all stopped people from saying these sexist things for the longest time, or racist things or what have you, that we could have stopped some of this culture of rape and racism, but we haven't, because we've just let it go, because we're just like, it's those rascally old guys.
It's good old boys club. Boys will be boys.
They're gonna do it. We might as well just try to. No, it's unacceptable. And that's the conversation that you need to be having, is not like, how do we protect our daughters from these rapists? It's how do we stop rapists from being rapists, you know?
Right.
How do we stop raising people who think it's okay to use their power over someone in that way? It's not okay. So yeah, stand up. If you're able, you should try. You know what's so funny though, is there was an episode of, I've been watching while I research and stuff, I'll have a show on. So I've been having on King of the Hill, and King of the Hill was so ahead of its time and just about everything. But there was a whole episode about that where Luann gets kind of sexually assaulted at her job at the golf course. And what first happens is Hank gets assaulted by a dolphin.
That's right. Oh my God. I was literally just reading about that earlier today.
Yes. Oh, really?
Yes.
Yes. He gets assaulted by a dolphin, and he's so ashamed that he doesn't want to tell anybody. And Luann knows, but they keep it like this ultra hush hush secret. Then she gets assaulted by this dude at the golf course, and it's happened a couple times, and she's like, no, I just want to push it under the rug. That's how we handle things like that, right? You know? And he's like, he can't say anything otherwise because he had done the same thing. And then he has to come out with it and say, I was assaulted by a dolphin. It was terrible and traumatizing. And then she sticks up for herself. So anyway, I was just like, oh my gosh, this show is so perfect. It's so perfect.
So ahead of its time. You're totally right.
Anyway, let's finish. So it is absolutely despicable that the military doesn't take sexual assault and rape allegations seriously, and the perpetrators are very rarely held accountable for their crimes, which obviously does not go unnoticed, as soldiers across the country as a whole seem to think Fort Hood is a less than desirable station. But also, this is, like you were saying, this is across the board in every branch of the military. It's not just at Fort Hood. It's all throughout, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode.
It's not just undesirable locations. It's also desirable locations. It's also people who are just going into tech school. It's also people who are in basic training who haven't even gone to tech school.
Yeah.
It's so many situations. It's training schools. It's all of the schools. It's every single fucking place. Yeah.
So the survivors of assault notice that this goes on, and like you said, it makes them either just quiet up about it. They don't want to get kicked out. They don't want to be tormented and taunted by their fellow soldiers. But also it gives other people the idea that, hey, I can do that too. I think that I can use my power to talk to this 18-year-old girl who's scared out of her mind and make her do things for me. And whatever else that goes on. There's a lot of terrible stuff that goes on, like we have talked about multiple times, and we'll probably continue to talk about.
Because until it changes, it has to be talked about.
Exactly. So the military has to change the way they handle allegations, victims, and most especially the offenders of the crimes that are happening against and among its service members. Why are we telling young people to join the military to serve their country and make us proud, but then neglect their safety and mental health while they're doing it? Mental health is a serious issue, and if we took it as such, I believe many of these deaths could be prevented. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of things could be different if only we let the people who are serving in the military have access to the mental health that they desperately want in many cases. The culture of protecting those higher in the chain of command and silencing the survivors of their violence is unacceptable, and it needs to change, in case we haven't made it clear. So is this just a matter of young people being thrust into high-stress situations with little to no guidance on how to handle that? Or is it a culture that is bred at Fort Hood and further in the military itself? I think that's a question that we need to ask ourselves as a whole, considering that we have a terrible military-industrial complex. And in having that complex, it's so ironic and terrible that we neglect those people altogether.
Yeah, for sure.
Once they serve, before they serve, while they serve. It's really unacceptable. And, I'm no bootlicker, but if you're putting yourself in a position like that, you should at least have access to basic human needs 100%. And rights.
Especially if that's something that the military touts to you.
Right.
Is that you're going to get you're going to get free health care. You get free medical. You get free blah, blah, blah. If that's something that you're touting to me, give that to me.
Right.
And even after you are out, you're supposed to get your benefits. You're supposed to be mental health.
Oh, heck yeah.
And health services are supposed to be available to you. Why does it take 6 months for me to go through the fucking VA?
Or they tell you, sorry, but we have to cancel your first appointment that you've been waiting for 6 months. Yeah.
Fuck.
We don't have enough people to treat you. So it's really awful. And it's just like anything else that we talk about. We have to keep talking about these things in order to try to get them to be changed. But for now, that is where we're going to end our episode. I guarantee Fort Hood Part 2 is going to come at some point.
100% has
and
to.
Wherever else that we decide to talk about, because there's obviously a lot of stuff going on in the world that needs a light shown on it. So thanks for listening, everybody. We hope that you've learned, gotten angry. Maybe
I shouted at you. I didn't mean to shout.
Me or at the audience?
Everybody.
It's okay. I get like that. So join the club. And if you want to join our club, actually our cult, where
our
maybe
family.
You might get a little in our family. Yes, more importantly. Why don't you head over to patreon.com/creepitrealpod. Creep It Real Pod. And we just actually this past week put up an episode about a very famous disappearance or kidnapping of Johnny Gosh up on our Patreon. And we have been doing pretty well about posting about 2 episodes a month, a couple videos here and there whenever we record ourselves doing
the Estes
method and just any other random things. And obviously all of our patrons that were patrons in the month of June and before obviously are getting
your shirts
for to thank them for their beloved family ties that they've created with us. And then we're going to sell those shirts. So get ready. If any of you guys see the shirts, we've posted them a couple times, but we'll post some more pictures of them because they're pretty amazing.
They're pretty sweet, dude.
They're amazing. And so they're going to be available to buy for those of you that aren't patrons. If you want to, though, join up on Patreon, go do it because you're going to get a lot of cool stuff. Maybe we could a little discount on the shirt.
For sure. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Also, if you are interested in any of the exclusive content that we have put on Patreon, that's available at literally any level of patronage.
Yeah, the the exclusive content stuff for sure. So go on over to patreon.com/creeperupon. I know we're some like shills, but it's quite a little family and it's just growing by the week. And I think eventually it's just going to be super awesome. You can do private events on Zoom or on Google, what is it? Hangout and stuff like that where I'll just get to hang out with each other.
I love that.
That's like the most fun thing ever.
Anyways, thank you guys for listening.
We love you. Have a great life.
Have a great everything.
Keep it real, maybe.